Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Rave Green TV. And this is going to be your preview for this weekend's match between the Chicago Fire and our beloved Seattle Sounders. And for today's video, I'm joined with a very special guest, my good friend, Alex Calabrese, who is a writer for Hot Time in Old Town covering the Chicago Fire. Alex, I appreciate you coming on and doing this preview with us.
Yep, happy to be on the channel.
Yes, but boys and girls, as every preview goes, we're just going to be talking about, our opponents this weekend, which will be the Chicago Fire and our Seattle Sounders, kind of talking about the recent matches, and then obviously giving our thoughts, the build up to this weekend's match between the two clubs. It's going to be exciting. I mean, it's been an interesting up and down roller coaster season for the Fire. If you want to go a little bit in depth about that, talking about it, what has your thoughts been on the Chicago Fire season so far?
I would say that in the off season, the Fire absolutely hit on everything. Bringing in Xherdan Shaqiri from Olympique Lyonnais. Obviously, he is the highest paid player in MLS, but that's a world-class player with world-class talent who can just make a huge impact when he's at his best. Then there was Rafael Chicos, a center back, who came in from the Bundesliga and has been an immense upgrade on Francisco Calvo. And then a couple other signings here and there coming in, like Jairo Torres, an up-and-coming player from Mexico, and Jon Duron arriving from Colombia. So coming into the season, like I said, there was a lot of buzz, a buzz that I really haven't felt around this team since that 2017 season that we mentioned before. Going into the opening game, there was a really big crowd, a lot of excitement. And the first couple of games went really, really well. The Fire were actually in first or second place after week 5 or 6. And then everything started to go sour. There was a 10-game winless streak where the Fire just couldn't get anything right. Now things are starting to look a little bit on the up. They've been able to get a couple of wins here and there. But at this point in the season, the playoffs look like a stretch, a big stretch, and we'll just have to wait and see what the Fire can get out of this season.
I mean, one guy that has taken charge for you guys that I've had big praise for, I've talked about on my personal channel. I mean, obviously, Xherdan Shaqiri, everyone knows the controversy of the things I've said about him, that he'll be better than Insigne. Hopefully he proves me right. And then obviously you guys also appointed former Sounders assistant head coach, Ezra Hendrickson, as your guys' head coach. I mean, what has your thoughts been of him so far and his short tenure so far with the Fire?
Yeah, it's been interesting for Ezra because this is his first job in MLS as a head coach. He's been around the league for over 2 decades, but this is his first job as a head coach. And I think he's still learning on the job a little bit too. He still has some developing to do as a head coach, but for the most part, he's done a good job at creating a good culture in the team and bringing a lot of the players that can fight for the coach. That being said, like I said, he's a little bit predictable with some of his substitutions, some of his in-game adjustments. That's something that definitely needs work, and that will come with experience. But I don't think, despite the poor season thus far, I don't think there's really any reason to get rid of him. Though there have been some shouts for that. I'm not in that camp at all. But yeah, there's plenty of work to do. But for the most part, I'd say he's showing signs of potential and growth.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the exact same boat with you. I mean, from the little that I've seen so far from the Chicago Fire, I've always been a big fan of him when he was an assistant coach at the Sounders, and obviously did some stuff when we had S2 as well. And I was a big fan of the things he had. And obviously as a new coach, some things will be predictable. And luckily he's a young coach. He's kind of got this new up and coming team. In regards to the Sounders, they've kind of had an up and down season so far. I mean, I've spoken about it a lot. As the outside looking in, what has your thoughts been of the Sounders season so far?
I think that the rest of MLS is kind of giving the Sounders a pass this year because of the CCL win. That's obviously that was the main focus for the first part of the season. And the Sounders are typically a team that are better in the second half of the season going into the postseason anyway. So I think the best is yet to come for this team. They've, again, that injury to João Paulo going to have a big impact. One of the best signings in that club's history. But from the outside looking in, again, this is still a team that will probably make the playoffs, even though, again, they haven't been at their best. It's been a successful year no matter what happens because of the CONCACAF Champions League.
This weekend's game between the Fire and the Sounders. Fire just in their last match got a big 2-0 win, unlike the Seattle Sounders, who lost yet again 1-0 to Nashville. So now what are you hoping for from the Fire in this game, as I believe this is going to be your guys' final game for your 3-game home stretch that you guys have had.
Yeah, this is the third game of the 3-game homestand. And going into it, the thought was that if the Fire really want to have any hope of making the playoffs, they really do have to win all 3 games. And if not that, 4 of this 5-game stretch that we're in the middle of right now, dropping the first game to the Columbus Crew in just terrible, disappointing fashion, a 2-0 collapse, went to 3-2, Cucho Hernandez scoring the winning goal. After that, it was really this game. This is it. If the Fire lose this game, that's that. But they came out and delivered. Jon Duron scored 2 goals in the first 15 minutes. He's really coming into his own a little bit as the starting striker. The Fire do need to beat the Seattle Sounders if they want to have any hope of making the playoffs. While they are only 6 points out, there are still 5 teams in between that. And they really do need to get at least 2 points per game for the rest of the season to have any hope of making the playoffs. So the expectation is to win if there's going to be any hope. But there's a lot of young players in this team who are really hungry to try and make that push for the playoff spot. And I think there's a belief among a lot of the core of this team that that is a possibility.
I think for both teams going into this game, it's kind of like their must wins because the Sounders are now coming off of back-to-back losses, one at home to the Portland Timbers 3-0, and then losing 1-0 to Nashville, 4 goals conceded, 0 goals scored. So there's kind of, not to say there's uproar in the Sounders side of things, but fans aren't happy. I mean, these are 2 very disappointing games. And it's not even just for the fact, we all know Sounders hopefully will make the playoffs. I'm not trying to jinx it. They always make the playoffs, but if you watch these 2 previous games, they looked terrible, like absolutely terrible. Obviously the Portland scoreline, I think, was a fair representation of their performance in that game. And then I think 1-0 might be a little bit too nice to how bad the Sounders played against Nashville midweek. So I think Chicago will have that little bit of momentum. And I'm a little bit worried that Sounders fans, and I'm hoping not the players and the coaching staff, think, well, Chicago Fire's in last place. Like, we should easily be able to roll over them. And I'm assuming we're going to have a very heavily changed lineup, and maybe Chicago will as well. They might have a heavily changed lineup. So it'll be interesting to see which players are going to be the ones to watch. And so that's what I'm going to ask you, like, what players are the ones to watch from the Fire? And then I'll maybe throw one out there for the Sounders.
Yeah, I think for me, there's a couple that Sounders fans may not be super familiar with to keep an eye on. For me, the number 1 is Brian Gutierrez. He just turned 19. He's an attacking midfielder from the Chicago area, a homegrown, and he has earned the starting job for this team over Jairo Torres, the designated player from Mexico, who's a Mexican champion. Brian Gutierrez had a beautiful assist in this last game with a, back heel in the air to Jon Duron. Jon Duron, another player to keep an eye on, the 18-year-old Colombian striker, was perceived at least a year ago as one of the top 100 players in his birth year on the planet by The Guardian. So definitely another player to keep an eye on. He, again, like I said, just coming off of 2 fantastic goals tonight, earning that starting job from Kasper Shabilko, who had a very successful time in Philadelphia in the past.
I'm going to go on the same lines a little bit for the Sounders, because as I said, we're going to have a heavily rotated lineup. Most likely Chicago will as well. So I'm assuming Dylan Teves might have another run out in this game, just like he did against Toronto. And then Danny Leyva in the previous game against Nashville and in Toronto came up with arguably man of the match performances in my eyes. I think he played really well. Definitely against Nashville, he was my man of the match. So I think it could be between these young players for both teams. Who's going to be more hungrier to want to win this game for their team? Who wants to prove a point that they deserve to be in the starting lineup for both of their teams? So definitely will be interesting. And I guess the best way to wrap this up is it's our score predictions. Who's going to be right and who's going to be wrong?
I'm going to have to ride the optimism after the Fire's win tonight. I'm going to say 1-0 Fire with a goal from let's go for Chris Mueller. He's been in good form lately. Fingers crossed, but that would be a fantastic result for the Fire. If they get any sort of way to get the win, I'll be happy.
For me, I'm a little bit conflicted because, as I said, 2 really poor performances, but it could be in classic Sounders fashion to come out and get a win here, as long as they're not overconfident in themselves. And I'm leaning towards a draw. I'm going to say maybe 2-2. I could see Sounders getting a late goal in this game just to snatch it, just to break Chicago Fire hearts. I have a feeling that Chicago might be up in this game for a majority of it. Sounders score first, Chicago get 2 because they get a little bit complacent. And then a late goal from maybe like Will Bruin.
That's a very Chicago Fire thing to happen, and I can 100% see that happening.
So yeah, boys and girls, mine and Alex's opinion only matters so much. Let us know in the comments down below. What is your guys' score predictions for this weekend's match between the Chicago Fire and the Seattle Sounders? Who are your guys' players to watch? What are your guys' keys to this match coming up? Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. Make sure to smash the like button on today's video. Make sure to go check out Alex as well. The links will be in the description, and I hope you all have a lovely day.